Okay, I want to put it to you this way. We have disaggregation in government, right? So this speaks to employment equity. We know, for instance, that if we are employing someone, if they are a woman and if they are Black, we try to create that percentage of inclusion in the workplace. That has not yet happened for LGBTI people. Furthermore, Tabili, we have not yet created forms and forms, the Z83 forms and application processes have not even allowed for people to do that. So if people shouldn't have to disclose then when those mechanisms are not in place. But if they want to disclose because they want to, for instance, perpetuate greater means of diversity, that is always their choice. And that's why I spoke to that particular piece of legislation about privacy, right? But I think holistically speaking, when it comes to disclosure, we need to then ensure that if we are going to say we want to disaggregate to include LGBTI persons in employment, we need to disaggregate and say we want to employ 5% of LGBTI people. We need to make sure that the processes in acknowledging that and the administrative parts of that are also covered, right? That's the first thing. So that it's comfortable for colleagues to disclose, and that we also then know that we are managing that kind of employment equity properly. But we don't have those systems as yet. So change attendance registers. Yes, please, can we change government attendance registers? I've done this with so many departments that have taken initiative in doing this. Social development, community safety, in Gauteng, particularly have been at the forefront of this. The South African Police Service has also, for instance, now tried to create a greater when someone is either a victim or survivor of a crime or they want to go open a case at the police station, there is demarcation made for, let's say, gender identity. We still need to work on it a bit because they haven't got it completely right, but they are making efforts to do this reform. And so it also depends on the HR department. It also depends on taking things to the national, provincial legislature to say, these are the workplace reforms that we would like to adhere to. Then wait for government or Home Affairs to effect ID changes? No, because this is what I had also explained, that a lot of people within our system won't be able to change the gender markers from M to F and M to F, given our bureaucratic systems, right? We know that if you want to change from S to M and M to F, if you're transgender, you have to be on hormones. Not everybody's going to be able to do that. So we need to mitigate factors in that regard also then to see how we can change those things. Then in terms of waiting for government to develop policies, policy and lawmaking is an ongoing process. It takes sometimes years to complete. It can range from a bill or act or a piece of legislation that takes 2 years. So, yes, this needs to be that's why I said multi-pronged approach. All of these mechanisms can happen at the same time. They don't need to happen all at once. Okay, I'm just gonna look at some of the more questions here. So Ilgina says, or Algina, sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. At the workplace to be accommodated, what will we know how to do? Example, we build toilets or not for who, and can we ask people to disclose? So, like I said, disclosure cannot be forced on anybody as yet, as they are not yet there are not systems in place for us to protect those people if they disclose. But if you, for instance, want to add gender neutral bathrooms, by all means, and we need to work on the policy change as well simultaneously. So here's another one in relation to bathrooms. The signage on toilets must be blank and not have a sign for ladies and gentlemen as a start. And people cannot be asked to disclose. I do not agree with it. Nisipela, I'm with you 100%. It's the same as making it mandatory for people to disclose their HIV status. I agree with you holistically. I do think, though, if we're going to get to that point of disaggregation, the only people that you could and might need to disclose to is HR when you get the employment, so that they ensure that there is reasonable accommodation for you as a LGBTI person in the workplace. In the same way that there is reasonable accommodation for someone with a person with disabilities. And when I say reasonable accommodation, I mean all of these factors like leave policies, like access to medical care, like um, all of these mechanisms that are in place. So, so that is definitely what I would say people would need to disclose. But further than that, it's always of your own volition whether you want to disclose or not. Okay. So someone has then said, how do I discriminate if I do not know? How do you not discriminate? HIV example is not similar to the matter, and I do feel like it is similar to a certain degree because your status also you don't need to let everybody know. But in terms of discrimination in the workplace, we can look at mitigating factors like acknowledging people's pronouns, not engaging in hate speech, not doing underhanded remarks, ensuring that there are mechanisms of awareness in the workplace, educative seminars, webinars, all of the above. Okay. Then there's a rise in Uber robberies. How can we assist? I think it's also that measure. I thank you, Tanya, for raising that from the mayor's office. There's Uber robberies and also the grinder kidnapping cases. I think even in terms of safety mechanisms that speak to inside and outside the workplace. How are we creating a better measure for citizenry in our regulation and policies, and how do we as government also approach these private businesses to say what are your policies and regulations? If we standardize our own practices, we'll get to a point where we can then for instance regulate private businesses in the same way. The difficulty is because our government has not yet created these standard measures of practice. It becomes difficult then to infiltrate the workplace in the same way. Okay, let's just see over here. I see there's a comment that says, pardon my ignorance, what is the historical background of the topic under discussion? When did it originate? And what social values does it teach an African child versus culture, excluding spirituality? Because I do not know your level of spiritual understanding. I'm glad for this conversation. So, this is very pertinent in terms of our holistic approaches to what it means to be LGBTI and African, right? Like I had said to everybody, we were, for instance, criminalized under apartheid, LGBTI persons. And so we are also still in a process for in reformation and restitution in our democracy for LGBTI persons. The difficulty is that in terms of racial reform, things have moved much quicker. We have really done well as a country to ensure that we have immediate access to these things and that there are all the policy provisions in place. When it comes to discrimination against LGBTI people, things have not moved as slow. But I also want to say to the person that has raised this, I know there's a lot of pushback in terms of spirituality, and then also when we speak about religion and spiritual practice. One of the biggest things is that homophobia and transphobia also came here from a perspective when colonization happened. And we were basically then told as Africans that the people already existing in our society that had expressions in different sexual orientations or had expressions in different gender identities, that they were not, that they were now seen as a sin or that they were not part of cultural practices. When we know in tribal communities throughout Africa and South Africa, matter of fact, that this inclusion had existed. So colonialism came with homophobia and transphobia to Africa. LGBTI people have always existed on the continent. These are not new things. The only difference now is that we actually have the vocabulary to exercise these things so that people can identify within certain frameworks. And now we ask the question, why do we need these frameworks for people to identify? And I'll say because now, since I've given this training, in the beginning, we spoke about orientation, gender identity, 6 characteristics. You can see that with even in the acronym, the needs of the L, the lesbians, are different from the needs of the transgendered individuals. The needs of transgendered persons are different from the need of intersex people. The need of intersex peoples are different than the needs of gay people. And so now we have to look at mechanisms in every department, every facet of government, every facet of society to ensure that there's a mainstreaming, right? So when we speak about healthcare for intersex individuals, I know, for instance, that the Department of Health in the provincial the provincial health Department of Health they have an indicator on their annual performance plan that says we are trying to reduce the mortality rates of children under 5 years old. So similarly, for intersex children, we could say we are trying to reduce instances of genital mutilation, and that is how we mainstream in our context. I hope that answered your question, because this is one of the biggest arguments that LGBTI persons or queer persons or African. I want to say to you, we've always existed. The terminologies just make people think that it's new because we all have to be onboarded in these awareness program, in these awareness measures of programming. Okay, so let me then just move on to the other questions. I see, will disaggregated data not further create a platform discrimination? Can a safe space and inclusive be created? Morelito, I appreciate that. But you must remember that even in sometimes in the system, you need to also have those things in place. And that information will be holistically seated with HR, right? If we have the right human resource mechanisms in place, there would be no reason for people to feel scared about, for instance, disclosing. And it also means to the privacy of that kind of disaggregated data. How is it being used? Are we using it for further policy mechanisms to be perpetuated? Are we using it to create better means of legislation? Are we using it to create better practices? What is the research? How does that inform the research within our various measures of departmental work, measures, more than creating discriminatory practices. And I speak particularly to this because I find the nuances between the marginalization of persons with disabilities and LGBTI persons, they're so similar if you want to exercise programming. And the wonderful thing about Gauteng in particular is that they've created a real measure of being at the forefront in the country of creating inclusive mechanisms for persons with disabilities, and there are so many ways in which we do that, the programs, how the sector organizes, the forums that are involved, advisory committees. So we are slowly in these persons as well within the Gauteng region, but we still have a long way to go. Okay, then a person said, this is so informative, also an eye opener, and yet people still need to learn to respect the next person. Elizabeth, I'm so with you for that. And I think we need to create definite measures of greater safety work environments, particularly in the public public service space. We here to serve our citizens. And I always say this to everybody that LGBTI people are not looking for special treatment. We are looking for mechanisms that ensure that the dignity of ourselves are protected, that we have protections when it comes to non-discrimination, that we have access to services without discrimination, that the accesses that are in alignment with our needs actually exist. And this is what restitution and a reform of law and possibility policy looks like for LGBTI people, because we have, for instance, not done well by LGBTI people as yet in that regard. There's still a long way that we ensure the citizens of Gauteng, and particularly the city of Johannesburg, that they feel safe enough to know that they want to be employed in our city, that when it comes to things like business opportunities, when it comes to, incubators for small businesses, when it comes to activations for NGOs, when it comes to, opportunities with regards to tendering, do we have, we're so far away for also onboarding the NGO sector even onto the CSD process, the Central Supply Database process. So they can't even tender for certain things. And a lot of LGBTI people have been forced into the informal economy because they can't, for instance, they were disowned by the family and they couldn't finish the education, or because of lack of funds and holistic measures of economic, inequity. So, colleagues, that is just the framing of what I wanted to give you today. I don't know if anybody brave enough to raise their hand and to ask questions out loud beyond the chat. I welcome the discussion, but I think maybe if we can give, let's say, 5 to 10 minutes to that and we can wrap up. I hope this has been informative. I will be able to share this presentation with Julian so he can distribute to everybody that's inclusive of the webinar. I do want to thank you, colleagues, for making the time to better educate yourself, to take the time to also understand how not only in your own environment, within your workplace, within the COJ, you can be more inclusive, but also how we can create inclusivity for citizenry that exists here within the city of Johannesburg. So thank you so much. I appreciate your time. And I will share my contact details if there are follow-up questions or if there's more that feels that we need to unpack, we can definitely do that as well. Otherwise, I'll see if Julian's flagged any hands. Otherwise, I'll give over then to Julian and the program director. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Roche, for such a robust presentation. I just wanted you to briefly talk about Pride and just a little history on Pride because we are celebrating Pride Month in October. I mean, I know we are well in the end of
We're
it.
at the end of it.
Yes, but
Yes.
can you just please share Pride? What is Pride? Why do LGBTI people celebrate Pride? Thank you.
Okay, absolutely. So, colleagues, I want to also frame it in the history of our country. When LGBTI people were criminalized, it was a two-pronged difficulty, particularly for those that were not criminalized in terms of their orientation, but also criminalized because of the racial background, because of their culture. And so at the time that there were a lot of marches in terms of reform for racial discrimination to be eased, there was similar efforts made by civil society to then also, abolish these apartheid laws that created this perpetuation of criminalization. So in 1990, a group of activists, particularly that came from what was then known as GLOW, and also organized a student organization from which was the Gay and Lesbians of Witwatersrand. They came together and they all knew the risks about taking to the street and creating this protest march was Dr. Beverly Ditsey, who is a known activist and has represented South Africa on UN level to ascertain rights in terms of not just our country, but also our continent and in the world. The former point in time was that people acknowledge the intersection of their identities. So Simon, who was a huge was a part of the ANC, and then also a gay man, had always said, I cannot separate my struggles. I am a black man and I am a gay man, and both of these things are important. So 1990, they took to the streets through Johannesburg. They knew they were illegal, and that was the advent of the first Pride March in actually in South Africa. That's why, and it took place in October, and that's why we commemorate Pride Month in October. So since then, Pride has been, people always think about it as a party, as a celebration for people to just dress up. But in South Africa, we started from a very political context to protest against discrimination and violences. And so when we take to the streets year after year, we do this in remembrance of our initial focus that we are not yet Uhuru. We still have a long way to go. We still have a long way in terms of all of these things that I had mentioned, for reform, for restitution. And so with our organization, which is Forum for the Empowerment of Women, we also started Soweto Pride about 22 years ago. And this year we celebrated 20 years of that commemoration. We partnered with the city of Johannesburg that has really been wonderful in creating those supporting mechanisms for us to just ensure that we had an array of build up activities and dialogues and speaking opportunities for education, but then also the actual march. And we frame it in this way that we know that prides have always been looked at in the city center close to Sandton, but we also wanted to take it back to the township space so that it's in the communities where people belong. There are high rates of violences, particularly for LGBTI persons that live in the township. So we wanted to take back the streets, create that visibility, call in allies also to march with us, so that we can also experience moments of queer joy and solidarity and safety. So, Jade, I don't know if there's anything else you want to add to that, but I think that's definitely the context where we move in terms of Pride Month. Every year we raise the flag at Constitutional Hill because it's a political stance first, more than it is just looking for nice to haves and parties. We are still embarking on a way where we need everybody's help on board to ensure mainstreaming of LGBTI rights in Gauteng, in the city of Johannesburg, but also the whole of South Africa. And I think with the city taking this approach to create better means of education, we can definitely be at the forefront of that conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Roche. I think right now we can hand it over. If there are no questions, we can hand it over to Dr. Nkensani Makobela to do the vote of thanks and closing remarks. Thank you so much, colleagues.
Thank you, Jade. Much appreciated. Good morning. It is still good morning, colleagues. What a wonderful and enlightening program that we have just had. I have one of the best job of the day of thanking all the wonderful people who made this Pride Month webinar possible. Please just all of you unmute because I am going to ask you that if you felt at some point today, can we just get a little round of applause for our amazing speaker or speakers because Jade also spoke. Please unmute and give that round of applause because I am so inspired right now myself. Are we having applause, colleagues? Or should I? Oh, okay. I see. All mics have been opened. Yes, I can also see.
Thank you, everybody. I think we've built a lot of allies today, Doctor. We've built a lot of allies today.
Thank you. Colleagues, as we come to the end of today's enlightening and impactful program, which are really very, very inspiring for me and I think for everybody, I would like to extend our heartfelt thanks on behalf of everyone here. Uh, First, a sincere thank you to Jade Madingwani, the Executive Director of the Forum for the Empowerment of Women, for a warm welcome that he's given us and opening remarks that set the tone for an inclusive and progressive dialogue. Your guidance today has been instrumental, Jade. Rochelle, Rochelle, I would
Yes,
like to
doctor.
extend our heartfelt thanks, really. Um, Rochelle is also from the Forum for the Empowerment of Women. Thank you for enlightening us on the complexities of microaggressions and LGBTQIA+. I always struggle to say it, identities. Your insights have truly deepened our understanding and reminded us of the importance of respect, empathy, and inclusivity of our interactions. Thank you for equipping us with the awareness and knowledge to foster a more inclusive and understanding environment. We are grateful for the passion and clarity in which you presented this and in which you brought such essential topic to us. Um, and thank you again for your in-depth presentation on creating an inclusive workplace culture and for guiding us through the critical issues of accommodation and anti-discrimination policies in the workplace. Uh, your expertise has shed light on the importance of creating a fair, supportive environment where everybody feels valued and respected. We appreciate the clarity and actionable steps you provided, helping us understand not only the policies, but the principles behind those policies. And thank you again for empowering us with the tools to build workplaces where inclusivity is fundamental practice, not just a policy, and for shedding light on the structural discriminations of LGBTQIA plus individuals often face, ranging from challenges with gender facilities and same gender leave forms to restrictive dress code. That was quite interesting and enlightening. Your discussion on deeper issues like hate speech and hate crimes was both eye-opening and impactful. Thank you for bringing these crucial, often overlooked topics to the forefront and for equipping us with, with the understanding needed to address them in our spaces as well. Again, Rocher, let me take this opportunity to thank you for I know this was not supposed the one on policies and case studies and legal matters, but you've handled that so well. You have enlightened, you have highlighted both the importance of inclusivity, the actionable steps we can all take to foster safe and respectful environments. Your contribution has been invaluable, and our understanding and committed to
Thank
equality.
you so much, doctor.
I
I want to reiterate to the colleagues that we also appreciate it to share the space, and we always here to information share. This is an ongoing process, and of course, we can do this in many different ways. But we do appreciate that we're shedding light on Pride Month, and that the city of Johannesburg is in creating inclusivity in this way. So, thank you from our side as well.
thank you very much. Our heartfelt to everyone here for engaging with open minds and hearts. Let us carry forward what we have learned today to build truly and inclusive spaces. Gillian, let me take this opportunity to thank you for being a wonderful coordinator as well, for taking us through this. You made this. Thank you, everybody, colleagues. Thank you once again for this opportunity to be part of the journey towards a more understanding and welcoming community. And we look more for such partnerships and collaborations. With that, colleagues, may we all take these learnings forward to inspire change in our respective spheres. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
Julian. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Hope to see you soon, everyone. That this is just the beginning, not the end.
Definitely.
Thank you, colleagues.
Bye bye.
Rochelle, I cannot thank you enough. This was really, really eye-opening.
So happy. I'm so happy. And in person, Doctor, it's so much better because then people aren't shy about asking questions. We create a environment where everybody can speak to these things. But we can obviously, this is an ongoing process, and we're happy to also assist in any way that we can.
Would appreciate that indeed.
Okay.
There's been a very, very useful and insightful session. So please hold our hands. We are learning every day, and I'm glad that Bennett and his team thought of organizing this and brought all of us on board. And that the attendance was also very good. People were open-minded, people participated, and yeah.